tomatoes this time today. And I'm just going to open them up. And I'm going to use the whole can. I'm going to use the juice and everything that's in there because the juice from the tomatoes are actually going to help to cook the onions. So I'm going to put the, sorry, I got to get some of these tears out of my eyes here. All right, so I'm going to add the diced tomatoes and green chilies in my pot here. And then I'm going to add my onions. And I'm going to start to cook those together. So I've got my diced onions with my tomatoes and green chilies. Now, if you like your chili a little bit saucier, pardon me, you can use a can of tomato paste, or you could leave it out. Can everybody see that? I'm going to leave that out for today. And right now, I just put everything in a pot. And I'm just going to let that simmer for a bit. I'm going to put this on medium heat and just cook my onions and the tomatoes with green chilies. Now, the one thing I didn't use to saute the onions is that I didn't put any oil in this. So if you wanted to add a little bit more flavor, a little bit more fat to your recipe, you can cook the onions in some olive oil or some canola oil or something like that. But you really don't have to do that. The nice thing about this is you've already got some liquid in the pan from the tomatoes, and those can also be used to saute your onions. So the next thing I'm going to do is add some garlic. And I've got a couple different types of garlic that you could possibly use. So if you don't have any fresh garlic, you could use garlic powder. If you don't have garlic powder, you can use what I call jarlic, which is garlic in a jar. So you could use about a teaspoon of that, or if you have it, you can use a clove of fresh garlic. Now, a clove is just, one piece. It's not this entire bulb. So don't put the whole bulb in there. Nobody will eat your chili, it'd be too strong. So you're just going to need like 1 clove of garlic, which is just, 1. And you're going to just slice that up and dice it really small into tiny pieces after you've taken off the skin. But today I'm just going to use my jarlic because it's easy. So I'm going to take about roughly a teaspoon of this garlic and throw it in there. And I'm just going to continue to saute the onions and the garlic in the tomatoes until the onions start to get kind of clear. So if you see in a recipe where you're cooking your onions until they're translucent, that means that the onion is going from like a white color to kind of like a clear color. So that's what it means when your onions are kind of cooked and they're translucent. So now I'm going to add my other spices that I have in here. So I've got a teaspoon of each. So I've got a teaspoon of chili powder. Everybody see that? And all of these spices are really inexpensive. You could find these just about anywhere. You don't have to even go to the grocery store. You can go to the dollar store and find chili powder or, oregano or cumin. So you can find all of these really inexpensively. You can find them at Big Lots. I mean, most of these run you about a dollar for a container, which is pretty cheap. You'd also find them at, the grocery store, obviously, in the spice section. So the advantage of putting in your dried spices early is that they do something called blooming. And what that means to bloom your spices is to add them to either some hot oil or some hot water or hot broth or something like that. And then that releases some of the oils that are in the dried herbs, and that improves the flavor. So the thing is, like, if you make soup and you add your spices at the end of the soup, they're just going to hang out and float on the soup. So you want to cook them early in the recipe in either some oil or some hot water or some broth, or in this case, we're putting them in with the tomatoes. And what that does is it helps to enhance the flavor of the spices. So I've got cumin. To me, cumin is what really makes chili taste like chili. To me, chili powder is okay, but I usually go heavy on the cumin. So cumin is really popular in Indian food as well. And then you'll find it in a lot of Mexican cuisine. And then I've got oregano, which is pretty popular in Italian food. It's also popular in Mediterranean cuisine and also Mexican food. So those are a couple really good spices. So I'm gonna turn this down a little bit. I'm gonna let these simmer for a tiny bit longer until those onions are kind of cooked down and those spices are really blended in. And then what I'm gonna do is just add 2 cans of beans. So I've got some black beans here. And the benefit of using beans is that they're a really good source of protein. They're completely fat-free, they're high in protein, and they're really high in fiber. And the benefit of both protein and fiber is that they help to keep you feeling fuller longer, so they're really beneficial to your health, and they're beneficial to your blood sugar. The only downside I would say of beans is that, you know, they make you gassy. But I always say to people that gas is good because that means that your body's producing good bacteria in your bowels. And that's important because it helps to keep your immune system running. So you really want the bacteria in your intestines to be strong because that promotes immunity, which means, you know, it prevents you from getting sick. And that's pretty important, especially now. So what I'm going to do with these beans is just take them over to my sink and drain them and rinse them. And what that does is it leaves them a little bit less kind of gooey and sticky, but it also reduces the sodium that's in the beans, and that's better for your blood pressure. I'm going to take these over to my sink and drain them and rinse them, and then I will be back in a flash. Okay, so I'm back, and my beans are both drained and rinsed. And I'm just going to get them all out of there, make sure I recycle my can. I've got 1 can in there. I'm going to make sure they're all out. And you can buy beans really inexpensively. If you use dry beans, you could use dry beans in this recipe, but you're going to have to soak the beans overnight because they take much, much longer to cook than canned beans. So I like canned beans just because they're convenient and they're economical. I mean, a can of beans will cost you maybe 89 cents or so at the store. So then what I'm going to do is just basically just blend these tomatoes that I've cooked with these onions and black beans and all these spices. And I may add just a little touch of salt, like my little salt and pepper shaker here. These are a gift from my dad from years ago. I still have them. They're probably like, I don't know, like 25 years old, but you know, they still work. So I'm gonna add a tiny bit of salt to this, and you can also add more salt, or you can add more chili powder or whatever other kind of spices that you want to add in there. But basically you'll let this simmer for probably another 5 minutes, and then it's pretty much ready to go. Now there's a couple things you can do with the chili. You could eat it. Obviously you can eat it just, I guess I'll pop back in here. You can eat the chili by itself, or you can put it over rice, or another option that you could do if you have leftover chili. We like to do this kind of often in my house is we just buy like some whole wheat tortillas, or we'll make corn tortillas, and then you can make them into either burritos or you could make it into like a black bean and cheese quesadilla or something like that. But it's pretty versatile recipe, so it's pretty simple. But again, you can put it over rice, you can eat it by itself, you could put it with some couscous or quinoa is another good grain to try. Or again, you could wrap it up into either a wheat or like a corn tortilla or something like that. And that's it. Just a couple other nutritional key points. So when you combine, so I'm gonna give you my example of my salsa. If I combine a food that's high in vitamin C, so tomatoes have vitamin C or peppers are high in vitamin C, when I combine that with a food that contains plant-based iron, so these beans have 8% of the daily value for iron, which is not a whole lot, but when I add some vitamin C to those beans, it improves the absorption of the iron. So that helps to give me a non-meat source of iron that I'm getting from plants. And the same is true as if, you know, like if you had some strawberries on your breakfast cereal and your breakfast cereal has some iron in it, the vitamin C that's in strawberries is going to improve the absorption of iron from your cereal. So it's kind of cool how nutrition works sometimes, because you might think you're only getting one nutrient when you're really getting a whole bunch all at one time. So that's my demonstration. I'm going to go ahead and open up to questions. So if you guys want to unmute yourselves.